So let's take a look at the internet weather for this past week. These are the top 10 most probed ports, so that's the volume of probes. And the number one port for this week is 80 TCP, which is unchanged from last week. Number 2 is 23 TCP, which is telnet. 22 TCP is SSH. 8545 TCP is Ethereum, the GF daemon. In 5th place, we have a 2345 TCP, which is postgresql, which actually there's a bit of a data glitch last week, but it's been down 5 since last week, but we'll go into that one in a second. 445 TCP, which is SMB, most likely related to the Eternal Blue, Eternal Romance family of vulnerabilities. Port 8000 TCP has jumped up out of nowhere, which is what Ganesh had talked about. 1433 is Microsoft SQL Server, which is down 2 spots. 3389 is Remote Desktop Protocol, also down 2 spots. And rounding out with number 10 is 21 TCP, FTP. So taking a look at the most sources probing, 445 we talked about is SMB, 23 is TCP. In 3rd place is 8080. 80 TCP is also up there. 80 ICMP is our echo request, so a whole lot of ping going on. 5555 is Android Debug Bridge, which has been in the top 10 for a while. And that's Android devices that are exposing a debug interface to the internet, which sounds a little crazy because it is. Ports numbers 7 and 10 are both related to BitTorrent. 81 TCP is another web port, and 31 ICMP is network unreachable. So, with that said, let's take a look at some of these ports. There's 2345, which has been up in the top for a little while here. Like we said, we had a little bit of a data issue last week, but this is PostgreSQL. It's another one of these other databases. It turns out that it's another one of the databases that doesn't authenticate its users by default. So as long as you can connect to the port, you can talk to it. And it seems like every week we've got a different database that was never meant to be put on the internet, and people can go and query it or even use features of it to install software, do crypto mining and things like that. So the scan flows, you can see that, around the 13th, there was a sort of a test spike, I would probably call that. And then starting midday on the 15th, we had a significant uptick. And it did fall off here in the last 24 to 48 hours. Whether that will come back or not remains to be seen.
It's interesting. You mentioned that this Postgres doesn't have any security controls on it, and actually it turns out that there are a number of database technologies that have that property, and many times database technologies, it's all about just organizing data and facilitating lookup or analysis. It's not necessarily to protect that data. So and particularly when organizations are trying database technology in a cloud environment, it is kind of a recipe for disaster if you're not very careful about it from a security standpoint.
Yep, and we have covered a couple of those technologies. Redis in particular was the last couple of weeks. In fact, when I was making my slides today, I took my slide for Redis and I changed the numbers in the name, and the phrase "does not authenticate users by default, data theft possible" was just use it again. So. Scan sources on port 23 telnet. This is a 60-day view, and it's been up and down. It seems like it's come a long way, but I guess 23 telnet is not as lucrative a scanning target as it had been. We do see a small spike in the last 24 hours here, but definitely down from the glory days of the last year and the year before. Scan sources on 445 SMB, it actually is trending downwards as well. But a regular daily cycle we've been observing for quite some time here. So this is your port 8000 TCP. I had pulled a 15-day view of the scan flows per hour. Like you said, this is CV 2018 10088 being used by Satori. The bug is a buffer overflow bug. I went back 300. That's actually 300. No, I show 15 days here, but I went back 365 to see if the landscape looked any different, and it didn't. I mean, these small upticks here was the extent of what you would see. Nothing compares to the spike that we just saw. So that's a heck of a spike.
It's pretty formidable, yeah. Peaking out a little over 600 million probes in an hour, and from our visibility standpoint, which is not covering the entire network by any stretch of the imagination. It's a representative sampling.
So this is an interesting one I don't have a full picture of yet, but port 10,022 showed up on our alerting. And there's only a handful of sources responsible for this in China, but it is peaking out somewhere around 14 million scan flows per hour. No, yeah, per hour there. And that sort of came out of nowhere as well. This is a 15-day view, and going back beyond that isn't very interesting either. 10,022, the most I could see about it was that it was being used or suggested as an alternate SSH port for some people who were wanting to change their SSH port because they were probably seeing tons and tons of brute force attempts. So it may be that somebody else is branching out, finding other places SSH is hiding and trying the same tactics against them. That's what I think this is. And the last one is 17,990 TCP, which is related to HP ILO remote console, and that also had triggered some of our alerting in the last couple of days. So I pulled 90 days worth. Seems that we had actually seen a major spike a while back, but this spike here on the far right is the one that triggered our alerting for today. And there seemed to be, the top was somewhere around 50 million scan flows per hour. This recent one was 25,000. These are typically these two sources in the US that show up a lot when you take a look at the alerting that we've got. And then there was one in Romania that showed up periodically as well. Not always, but occasionally, yeah. And that's it for the internet weather for this week.
All right, very good. Well, very good. Hopefully some of these problems will go away.